Welcome into another edition of Talkin Ducks. It is week one of the season as Oregon gets set to take on Portland State. We'll preview that game. Dan Rubinstein from the Solid Verbal will join us with his thoughts on the Pac-12 Conference. Also, we catch up with former Oregon running back great Kenjon Barner. He'll talk more about what he sees from this year's group of backs. But let's go ahead and get to the opening drive, brought to you by Les Schwab Tire Centers, where they've been doing the right thing since 1952. And we welcome in the crew, Joey Harrington, Anthony Newman, and Aaron Fentress from the Oregonian. And guys, Oregon taking on Portland State this Saturday. It's not the biggest matchup, but Joey, let's start with you. What do you want to see from Oregon in week one? What should fans really try to keep an eye out for?
Well, what do I want to see? I want to see them put their foot on the throat of that ugly T-shirt that Fentress is wearing right now. I mean, what he actually did is he wore a blazer over the top of the T-shirt so that it kind of covered up the sides. So it could be it could be Hall of Shame because you can only see the A and M in the
No, make no mistake. That's Portland State Hall of Fame.
Which can we acknowledge? Okay, we don't very often on this show. Give credit to, or give really any sort of love at all to Aaron Fentress. 87-88 team, right?
Yeah, 87-88 teams, both in the Hall of Fame. You know, Chris Crawford, the late great Chris Crawford, and Barry Naone, Curtis Delgado, they carried me there. I held a mean clipboard, but I played enough to letter both years, so I'm in the Hall of Fame. And you were there as a young kid watching those teams, dreaming of being the next Aaron Fentress.
I'm not going to lie. I was sitting there, my buddy Kevin Gleason, Jeff Dixon, and I, we were sitting in, what's the section? It's like 222 up in the corner. We were eating the firecracker popsicles they used to sell at Civic Stadium when you were playing the Texas A&I Kingsville Fighting Javelinas. So I remember it well, those Pokey Allen teams. So just a little bit of praise for Mr. Fentress before we absolutely smother him in his university during this show. What do I want to see? I want to see dominance. I want to see absolute dominance from the opening snap until the end of the game. I want to see an offensive line that is really the only question mark on this offense. And Anthony, you can talk about the defense here in a little bit and what you want to see from them. But I want to see this offensive line dominate, because if we have issues, right? If you're giving up sacks, if you're giving up negative plays, it's only going to compound as the season goes on. It's only going to start the questions. It's only going to start that, well, are they really as good? Well, maybe they should make some, just come out and absolutely put your foot on the Vikings' throat, establish the line of scrimmage, and just get off to a good start. Because we know Bo's incredible. We know the backfield's incredible. We know these tight ends and wide receivers are incredibly deep after the offseason. So that's what I want to see, is this offensive line come out and establish themselves.
All right, that's all well and good. They lost 52-6 last year to UW. That's what I want to see in this type of game. It shouldn't even be remotely close. Everything Joey said was correct. The only thing I'm going to add here is, one, remain healthy. You don't want a fluke injury in a game like this. And two, let's see some Ty Thompson about midway through the third quarter. Open up the playbook. Don't hand it off and throw screens. Let's see him air it out and show that if needed this season, you're not just going to hand it off 4 straight times like you did against Washington and give the ball back. You're going to let that guy throw the football, because if he's not ready to do that this year, his third year, then you know going into the season that Bo better not get hurt or you're in trouble. And then also you're thinking about your quarterback for 2024, because if Ty can't light up Portland State or being given the green light to do that, then you can't trust him moving forward. So I want to see Ty Thompson throw a couple touchdowns, 150 yards in the second half.
Aaron, I got a couple questions for you real quick.
Sure.
I don't remember watching you guys. I think I was playing at the same time you were playing. But what was your punting average again?
My punting average, me personally? I wasn't a punter, man.
Were you a punter?
I was a wide receiver. And you're lucky I didn't walk on it. You're lucky I didn't walk on it in Oregon. I was going to walk on it in Oregon your senior year, and I would have lit you up in practice.
That was a good one. I didn't expect that.
Wait, my bad. I'm sorry. Yeah. You're a receiver, not a punter. I thought you were a punter. Okay. Anyway.
That was good.
Another question. Why do you keep asking for Ty Thompson to get? Look at Joey. Joey, I can't even move on because you're just busted up. But you keep asking for Ty Thompson. Ty Thompson, he's a backup.
But you need your backup usually sometimes. They needed him last year, and they didn't trust him. We need to see development there. Don't you remember the Washington game? Bo Nix goes out. They need a first down, and they ran the ball 4 straight times. They did not want Ty Thompson throwing the ball anywhere. You can't have that from your backup quarterback. You need someone reliable because Bo can miss an entire game this year. Who knows? So I want to see some evidence that this young man is matured.
But you're his biggest fan, and I like that. But let's move on to the defensive side of the ball and what I'm looking for in this game. And Joey said it, dominance. You have to dominate this football team. You have to show this team that you're not going to end up at 71st, 71st or 72nd in the country in total defense. That has to change. And this is the start. I'm looking for guys to fly around. I want to see speed on the defense. I want to see pressure on the quarterback. I want to see playmakers in the back end. Yes, they're going to make some mistakes. It's the first football game, but make those mistakes going fast, going 100 miles an hour. I want to see 11 guys to the football. That's what I'm looking for, and also to stay healthy.
Can I throw something in here? I know we've kind of already been through this with Thibodeau, but we've got a guy who's potentially going to be the same type of disruptive pass rusher that Kenjon is, correct? I mean,
Yes.
If Mateo is what Kenjon was, this could be. I don't want to put that on him right away. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I want to see what he does against this Portland State team, right? Because this defense is going to have to improve, and it's going to have to improve dramatically, like you guys said, in order to hit that 11-win mark that I predicted last week, which is really the only thing that we're worried about is making sure that my prediction is right at the end of the year. So this defense is going to have to improve, and the defensive line is going to have to do a lot of it, right? If they can get pressure on the quarterback with a four-man pass rush, this defense is going to be able to do a lot of fun things. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to whether or not Mateo can be the type of edge rusher that I think everybody expects him to be.
All right, stick around. We're just getting started on Talkin Ducks. When we come back, we'll talk more about your appetite for these Week 1 games. Do you enjoy cupcakes like Portland State? Or would you rather have a porterhouse like Georgia last year? We'll break it down when we return. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Time now for Talkin Numbers, brought to you by Par Lumber. And as we look at Oregon's home opener, how about these impressive numbers for the Ducks? A 30-game win streak in non-conference home games, 18-game win streak in home openers. They've won 9 of the last 11 season openers. Their only losses, number 3 Georgia last year, of course, and then number 16 Auburn in 2019. And then they are 5-0 all-time against Portland State. And so, Aaron, let's start with you. It's a huge contrast from last year when you're taking on Georgia, the defending national champions, in Atlanta, and then nothing against Portland State, but you've got Portland State at home. You couldn't have a bigger difference in potential matchups. Do you like the big-time marquee matchups against the Georgias, the LSUs, the Auburns to start the season? Or is it better for Oregon to take on a Portland State at home, a much more palatable game?
It's extremely exciting to have two powerhouses play right out of the gate. Oregon did it against 2011 against LSU, 2019 against Auburn, last year against Georgia. There's probably some other ones in there as well. And that's cool and it's fun and it's exciting. But, you don't get a preseason. In most sports, you get some kind of preseason before you come out of the gate against, a top 10, top 20 opponent. So while it's exciting, I think from a football standpoint, it's better to start off with a tune-up game. So therefore, I have no problem with the built-in guaranteed win, even if it's an FCS team that you're going to give a good payday to, like a Portland State, and just tune up against them. But after that, you got to come back with something strong. Texas Tech is solid. I'd rather see them play someone better than that. Hawaii, pretty mediocre. But yeah, I'm all good with the easy win to start things off, just to get your feet wet.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Frenchers on this. I like my preseasons like. What do they say? Whenever you want to deliver bad news, you want it to be a compliment sandwich, right? So you want to compliment them on the front side, you want to compliment them on the back side, but in between, that's when you want to deliver the tough news. So I want my compliment against Portland State, like, hey, everything's great, we're doing well, here are the things to work on. On the back side, you have a softer compliment, hey, okay, we're tuning up, we're heading into the Pac-12. But right in the middle, that's where I want my toughness. That's where I want the game. That's where I want the Georgia. That's where I want, Texas Tech. They scheduled them a decade ago. Patrick Mahomes is still there, I think. God, it could have been a great game. So, yeah, I like this setup better than last year, where you come out of the gates against Georgia and then spend the next couple weeks really trying to like figure out, are we that good? Like who are we? I don't know. I think this gives you a clearer picture of who you are before heading into the conference schedule.
So real quick, Joey, do you remember who you opened up against in 2001?
Did we open the game against Wisconsin?
You did, and you won. Yeah. Big win out the game here before Nevada, before playing at Wisconsin where you lost.
Right, we did.
The tune-up didn't work out for you.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was thinking about that actually, because I remember Wisconsin being the second game my junior year, but I couldn't remember if we had somebody else my senior year. But yeah, that was a tough way to come out, because especially then, if you lost a game, it was like national championship, see ya. So to have that type of pressure right out of the gates, that's before you truly know who you are or what you need to work on, that's a tough ask.
Well, I think speaking for the players, they're going to say Georgia. I want to show the country that I can play. I want to show the NFL scouts that I can play against the best. And as a coach, I'm going to say Portland State. I'm like, I need that tune-up game for these guys. I need to know who can play, who can't play. I need to see the backups in the game, just in case guys get hurt. This is a collision sport, Mike Bellotti always says. So guys are going to get injured. So can my backups, play at a high level? I don't want to come out against Georgia doing that. And I have to give Georgia their props, or like in Alabama. They're good football teams. So you have to play your best football game one. And when you're looking at talent for talent, it doesn't match up. I'm being real. It doesn't match up. Portland State, that's a different story. Aaron, you said it. It's the tune-up game. It's the preseason. All NFL teams, they get preseason games, even though they're going against other NFL teams. But you get to see how your team works, and that's what I like. Kind of feel your team out, get that confidence, have your players get confidence, and then, like you said, go against a team somewhat like Texas Tech, but maybe a little stronger.
All right, when we come back, 3 washed-up players and a journalist will let you know our keys to success for Oregon's season this year in 2023. They have a high ceiling, but obviously some work to get there. We'll let you know when we come back on Talkin Ducks. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber.
Yeah, I think we got a really competitive team, right? It doesn't matter really what we're doing on that field. The guys that are in that space, they want to win, right? And it could be a drill in practice, or it could be a 2-minute period at the end of practice, or it could be a game. These guys want to compete. From a toughness standpoint, that's still being shown. It's a long season football. You're going to have bangs. You're going to have hits. You're going to get dinged here and there. We got to see what kind of team we look like at the end of the season, but obviously that starts with right now.
Welcome back. Time now for Made of Metal, brought to you by Leatherman. That was Dan Lanning talking about what he learned from his team after fall camp. And as you get set for week 1, there really isn't anything that can replicate the first game of the year. You know this, Joey. And so for Oregon, you take what you've done in fall camp. You now have this first game. You've got some questions coming in. Maybe everything gets answered, or maybe there's still some questions. But when you look at everything that you've gathered about this team and heard from the coaches, what do you think are these crucial keys to success for Oregon this year if they really want to reach their potential?
Yeah, I think it's going to be up front. I mean, we have established that they have incredible depth at running back. They've added depth at wide receiver. We're going to see, who essentially becomes the number 2 wideout this year behind Franklin. Great depth, or a great tight end in Ferguson. They had an offensive line last year that really, they got credit for it. But I don't think we really truly celebrated how incredible they were. They didn't give up a sack until, midway through the season, finished the season. It was like week 10 before they gave up a sack. As a quarterback, that is absolutely incredible to be able to have.
And I think that sack was on the quarterback.
Yeah. I think you're right, actually. I think he tripped. To be able to have that type of time, to be able to get the guys the ball in the right places at the right time is absolutely key. They lost 4 starters. They're returning 1 guy from that starting offensive line. And that is going to be the key to success for me, because that leads That really is the ignition to everything. If you're playing well up front, your quarterback can make good decisions. If he can make good decisions, he's not turning the football over. If he's making good decisions, he's getting the ball to the playmakers at the right time in the right places. That literally is the catalyst for everything. So this offensive line is going to be the key for me to see if Bo and this offense can be as good this year as they were last year.
And the other thing to that, Joey, too, is even if they're as good or close to as good on the offensive line, are they really going to only give up 5 sacks? Like, that was so incredible. If they give up a handful more, that could change the complexion of some games, unless the defense can produce some sacks. Now, to be fair, let's be fair here. I looked this up. Georgia had about 26 sacks last year, only gave up
against Oregon
points per game.
They had 26
USC got 36 or 38 sacks and gave up 28 points per game. So sacks aren't everything. However, you can't be just getting like 16, 17, 18 like Oregon did in a conference which is going to be loaded with quarterbacks. If you do that, and if the offensive line slips a little bit, all of a sudden things change a little bit. You're in some closer games. Things could happen. Boom, you drop a couple. So for me, I'm going to harp on this all season long. I'm going to be counting sacks. I'm going to be counting pressures. I want to see what Jordan Birch does, adding to him to this offense, to the defense. Because if they don't improve there, losses are coming. It's a guarantee because QBs are too good in this conference. They have to be able to make quarterbacks uncomfortable in the pocket.
Well, and to add to this challenge, you're playing a bunch of good quarterbacks. So Oregon has to have a good secondary. Well, the guy who has the most experience, the most snaps in the secondary, they moved him to linebacker, Jamal Hill. So Oregon has a lot of new guys in the secondary. No one even knows who's starting back there. It's a coin toss. So the biggest thing for me is you can't give up the big plays. You can't give up the explosion plays. You want that offense to have a 15-play drive and try to score it. And in those 15 plays, for sure they should make a mistake, and you can capitalize on that mistake. But the secondary has to step up. And again, we don't know who it's going to be. But we do know that they will be tested in the back end. If I see a new secondary, and Joey, you could talk about this. If I see a new secondary, I'm going to test this guy. I'm going to test this guy. Let me see if he can take this guy deep. I'm going to take this guy deep. So that's the thing. And then, I think the offense can help a little bit. I'm going back to the offense, though, is protect the football. Because if you give the ball, if you throw interceptions and you fumble, now the defense has to come back on the field. And now when you got these good quarterbacks you're facing, they're going to take some shots against the secondary that's not proven yet.
Okay, so let me see if I get this straight. The conference has, outside of Bo, 5 including Bo, 4 of the best quarterbacks in the country, and we are going into this season with 4 new starters in the secondary and relying on a true freshman as our best edge rusher.
And a questionable pass rush, yes.
Okay, cool. Hey, just wanted to see, make sure we're all on the same page.
No problem.
All right, when we come back, we'll have Dan Rubinstein hop on. We'll talk more about the Pac-12, how it's going to shake out. He'll also let you know the most underrated and overrated team in the conference. It might surprise you this year. Plenty more Talkin Ducks when we come back. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. It's time now for It Never Rains, brought to you by Sun Automotive. And with that, we bring in our great friend of the show, Dan Rubinstein from the Solid Verbal podcast. And Dan, great to see you again, my friend. How was the offseason before we start diving into stuff here?
What's that?
I said, how was the offseason before we start diving into stuff here?
Off-season was terrific. I've gotten a lot of outside time. I've baked a bunch of pizzas. I've jumped in a bunch of pools. How can anybody complain about a stretch like that?
No, you can't complain at all. And speaking of jumping right into things, let's do it. Week 0, where it's that little appetizer of college football, we got a chance to see USC take on San Jose State. And USC looked great on offense, but a lot of the same questions with their defense existed as San Jose State put up 28 points. If you're USC, are you hitting the panic button on defense after week 0, or what's your takeaway from that?
I'm not sure what you can do if you're USC. Your roster is what your roster is. And so I don't think you hit the panic button. I just think you search for ways to continue to evolve and improve. You saw them sending a lot of pressure early on in that matchup, and maybe that's because They don't trust their front four. Maybe that's because they saw something in San Jose State they didn't love. But you look at the number of chunkier plays that they gave up, and you know the Siobhan Cordero big scramble on 3rd and long was a key one early on in that matchup. Not key in that it's sprung San Jose State to a win, but it's concerning if you're USC. I know USC people had said that they were playing a bunch of freshmen early on to see what they had in the team, and they're going to rotate more than usual to keep bodies fresh for the Pac-12 season. That's all well and good, but everybody needs reps. Everybody needs reps early on in a season, and so I don't think it's going to be solved overnight. And USC's defensive recruiting out of high school isn't anywhere near the programs that they compare themselves against, both in the Pac-12 and nationally. And so that's the concern, that you can't just keep plugging holes in the portal to build a deep defense. You can find a defensive end here. You can find a linebacker there. But in terms of developing young guys along the way, USC is just behind in that regard.
It's a really good point you bring up, because every year going into the season, for every Pac-12 school, there's a lot of hype around maybe some of the offensive stars or guys that are returning, but you really have to look at the big picture to understand how good some teams are really going to be, or find out the truth about others. As you look at this conference in its final year, who do you think are some of the more overrated teams, and maybe a team or two that's underrated coming into this year?
Can I give you one that I think might be both?
Yeah, please do.
The Colorado Buffaloes might be so overrated in their exposure, obviously, because of Coach Prime and the attention that he, rightfully brings. He's a huge personality, that I think the thought is, okay, they're getting a little bit too much attention. Look how much they had to rebuild their roster. How are all these guys going to gel so quickly? The Pac-12 is especially tough at the top. I think they might be a little bit underrated, because I still think this is a talented team. I don't think their lines are going to be especially dangerous, but in terms of skill talent, the running backs, the receivers, the defensive backs, that's team speed that not a lot of teams in the conference can deal with. I still think the games are going to be won and lost up front, but in terms of the scares they can put into teams, and perhaps you look at what their November schedule is, I think it's, from Halloween on, they have Oregon State at home. They're on the road in a couple of, I think they go to UCLA. And so playing in front of 563 UCLA fans isn't terribly difficult. I apologize to my UCLA friends, but that's sort of a reality. So I think that's a team that is in that category. I think Arizona might be a little bit underrated. They were the number one most explosive offense in the nation last year in terms of the percentage of plays that went for longer yardage. And so if they can build any sort of defense that can get off the field, they kept teams under 40 the last 3 games. And look, baby steps, right?
Yeah.
If you're giving up 50 a game and you're keeping teams under 40, those are baby steps. Arizona's dangerous, even though they lost Dorian Singer to USC. Any given week, you saw what they did to UCLA, again, in front of 563 fans last year. In terms of other underrated teams or overrated teams, I'm not fully sold on Washington's defense yet. We talked about this on the show yesterday, the Solid Verbal, available wherever fine podcasts are found. If you're going to take Dan Lanning, Kalen DeBoer, Lincoln Riley to figure out their team's obvious weakness, and all of those teams have an obvious defensive weakness coming off of last year, I think I trust Dan Lanning the most to solve it. I think the talent level has increased the most in Eugene. I'm sure we're going to get to that, but I don't think Washington is fully overrated, but it's sort of like, let me see what you have with a healthy secondary before I fully believe in you as a top 10 program. That's all.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you bring up Oregon as well, too, because as 2 Duck alums, we're excited for this year.
Sure.
Bo Nix coming back. You've got billboards going up for him, landing in year 2. But every team, there's so many question marks nowadays because of the transfer portal, and especially for Oregon, where they're replacing so much of that offensive line. They lost a ton of depth at the linebacker position. But we said before, they're bringing in some great faces. This season for Oregon coming up, what do you think it hinges on? Are there 1 or 2 key things that you look at and say, hey, if Oregon can figure this out, they have a chance to be really special this year?
Getting off the field on defense. I don't care if it's the linebackers who step up or the defensive line that looks deeper with a lot of youth coming in, or the secondary breaking up plays. There's a lot of questions at every single point of that defense. This was one of the absolute worst programs in terms of getting off the field. And so one of the things that I look for, and I have access to some advanced metrics, is the percentage of times on offense you go 3 and out, and the percentage of times on defense you have a team that you force a team to go 3 and out. And Oregon was one of the absolute worst teams at that in the nation last year. And so to me, the whole season hinges on how often I see the back of defensive players' jerseys jogging off the field. That's it. Because you saw what, Michael Penix was able to do in terms of escaping pressure and stretching plays and finding guys on the perimeter on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. You saw it against Oregon State when the defense couldn't force 2nd and 9, 3rd and 9 and get off the field, even with a big lead. And so that to me is going to be everything. It's how often do I see the back of Jeffrey Bassa's jersey, the back of Popo Almave's jersey, if I pronounce that correctly. I just want to see I want to see the numbers jogging away. That's it. That's the whole season.
Hey, very simple right there. Now, for folks that follow you, they know that along with a solid verbal, you're a pizza aficionado. You really upped your game over the last couple of years, and the different things you work with, the different ingredients. I'm looking for a spicy take here for either the Ducks or the Pac-12. Everyone's got to throw this out at this point of the season, right? But what do you think is a particular take that you're looking at that maybe a lot of people are possibly sleeping on this year?
Well, I have Oregon going to the playoff. And I have Oregon going to the playoff because of my very specific rubric, and that do not consider teams as playoff contenders unless you are positive that the ceiling for the team is a good defense and a good quarterback. I think everything else is noise. And from the Pac-12, I don't trust USC's defense. I don't fully trust Oregon's defense, but if you're telling me that, Cam Rising coming off ACL surgery, you're telling me Washington's defense, which let a lot go in the passing game, and you saw them get pushed around by Oregon at the end of that game in a losing effort for Oregon, that it's not that spicy a take. I know they're a top 10-ish team right now. The other take I have is I think they could full on lose to Washington and Seattle and then beat Washington in Vegas to end up in the playoff. I think it might be a little bit spicy to say I think USC's defense is going to be fine. A lot of people are pretty down on USC's defense. I don't trust them to be playoff caliber, but I think they could be the 63rd best defense in the country, the 57th best defense in the country. That feels spicy to me after what we saw from them against Utah last year. Other things in terms of spice in the conference, I think UCLA is going to be good again. That's not that spicy. I'm just being nice, and that's spicy for me. I think Utah's going to take a step
You're just making up for the fact that you bashed the truth that they have under 600 fans coming to each game right there.
I know. They're starting Ethan Garbers at quarterback. We'll see what happens with the quarterback situation. I think Utah's going to take a step back, and I don't think it's because Utah's going to be bad. I think the combination of Cam Rising's knee, and I don't know if I trust the pop that they have on offense this year. I think defensively they return a ton and they should be strong on defense. Other thing, I think Arizona is going to be a bowl team this year. Is that spicy? I don't know.
No, I mean they're young. One team you haven't touched on though, Dan, Oregon State, that I think a lot of people are silently cheering for to just throw a wrecking ball through all this conference realignment and possibly win the conference. They were just a quarterback away last year. I know they lost a lot of talent, but what do you see for the Beavers?
I think they're going to run the ball really well. I think Jonathan Smith is probably one of the best 2 or 3 coaches in the conference, and he does a remarkable job in Corvallis. The thing that worries me about Oregon State is I think they are a developmental, every 3 or 4 years when they have a bunch of upperclassmen, they're going to be really good. But I think going back-to-back 9-10 wins with losing the corners that they lose, who were just terrific last year. Omar Spates transferring to LSU. I think the line's going to be good again. That's such a well-coached offensive line. But in terms of star power on defense, I think it's going to be somewhat of a down year for Oregon State. And you saw them just ascend last year, going from a terrible defense in 2021 to a really remarkable defense in 2022. So the spicy take I have is they're going to take a step back, but it's not going to be a pronounced, they'll win 7-8 in the regular season instead of 9. And I think they're going to beat, a chunk of good teams.
Well, it's going to be a crazy college football season. Dan, it's the final year of the Pac-12. You've got all this realignment coming up. You guys cover everything on the Solid Verbal.
We do.
What's in store for you guys this season?
A lot. So we are recording more. We have our Patreon, which is verballers.com. So we do ad-free shows and bonus shows each week. We're doing a show with Jeff Schwartz, Oregon Duck. I think he's actually an honorary captain for the Portland State game.
Right.
So there's that. Jeff is going to be doing X's and O's stuff across college football for us at verballers.com. And we're also doing our shows live for everybody. So on Wednesdays at noon and Saturday nights, we're calling it Saturday Night Ty after my co-host Ty, midnight Eastern time. So it's going to put a severe strain on my sleeping habits, my marriage, fatherhood, everything that I get. So we're going to be hustling all day on Saturday, putting out a ton of stuff on Saturday. And on the YouTube channel, live on Wednesdays at noon Eastern, live at midnight Eastern on Saturday nights.
You sound like you're making the same sacrifices every head coach makes across the country. Well, Dan, hey, my man, great catching up with you. Can't wait to chat with you more week after week. Don't forget, follow the Solid Verbal Podcast. So much more. You can support their Patreon. Plenty more when we come back on Talkin Ducks as we take a closer look at Oregon's matchup against Portland State around the corner. Stick around. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Time now for our legendary performance, brought to you by Abby's Legendary Pizza. And how about Bucky Irving in 2022? Last season really surprised everybody with his production, especially in the second half of the season. He started 12 games in his first year at Oregon, the sophomore transfer from Minnesota. He ran for over 1,000 yards, which is the most of any returning Pac-12 back coming into this season, and then averaged 6.78 yards per carry, which was fourth best in the Pac-12. And to talk more about running backs and Oregon's move to the Big Ten, Kenjon Barner, yes, the former great, sat down with Joey, Aaron, and Anthony.
All right, a few weeks ago when it was announced that the Ducks were going to the Big Ten, I reached out to Kenjon Barner to ask him what he thought, and he was all for it, excited about it for a lot of different reasons. Kenjon, welcome to the show, and just give us an idea of why you think this is such a good move for the Ducks. And when you and I talked, you talked a little bit about some of your conversations you had with NFL teammates about Pac-12 versus Big Ten. Tell us about that.
Right. I thought it was, and I think it's a great move for Oregon. Recruiting purposes and respect level. Being in the NFL, being able to communicate with guys. A lot of guys didn't want to come that far just for the simple fact that they weren't sure that their family could see them play. The area that they was playing in, it was far away. So I think that opens up a completely different pipeline in recruiting for Oregon. Guys that we necessarily wouldn't have access to because of location, we now have access to. And then secondly, respect. Voters didn't really respect the Pac, and I think we all know that. We all understand that. And I think them going there gives us that, because now you're in a conference with Michigan, you're in a conference with Ohio State, and the rest of those guys. So now you're going to have to play every week. You know, it's going to be a battle every week, and you'll get more respect as far as voting goes. And if we do lose, we won't drop 17 spots for losing one game. You know, those losses will carry more weight because of the teams in the conference.
Kenjon, you mentioned recruiting. Kind of a two-part question. Dan Lanning and his staff have done an incredible job recruiting from the Pac-12. What do you think the impact of moving to the Big Ten will have on Oregon recruiting? And tell me about, I guess, your relationship with Dan. Have you? I know when he came in, a lot of people were nervous. Like, who is this guy? And my experiences with him have been nothing but fantastic. I know that he reached out to a lot of guys that I played with. What have your experiences been with Dan, and how do you think his attitude, his energy, his staff is going to do recruiting now in the Big Ten?
I think they're going to do phenomenal. I think if anything, it's just only going to go up from here. They've done a great job being in the Pac and still getting guys to come there. But now you're a part of a conference that people value, people see differently, seeing a different light. I think that, like I said, I think it's going to bring in a completely different caliber of player that we necessarily didn't have access to. And as far as who Dan is a great dude. I've had a few interactions with him, conversations with him. Love his energy. I love who he is as a man in regards to how he treats those guys in that locker room. You know, his leadership. He treats them like men. And that's all you can ask for as an athlete, you know, growing into adulthood. You don't want somebody to treat you like a child. You want somebody that's going to respect you. You want somebody that's going to motivate you. You want somebody that you can identify with. You want somebody that can lead you in the right direction. He needs all of those things for those guys.
Kenjon, let's talk running backs. Okay, let's talk your specialty. And I got two questions for you. First, let's talk about the three running backs that are at Oregon: Bucky Irving, Noah Whittington, and Jordan James. I mean, those guys are some dudes. And the second question is, you're a competitor. And so you're in the backfield with some all-stars too. There's only one football. So how did you deal with sharing that one football? You wanted to be on the field being the guy, and you had to deal with some other good running backs in the backfield with you or sitting on the sideline. So, but talk about the 3 running backs that are with Oregon today.
I'm looking forward to seeing them all. I'm a huge Bucky fan. I think he has to become that guy. He has to become the LaMichael. He has to become what eventually I became my senior year, to where he can get the ball in those clutch situations and get the job done. I think he needs to run the ball more. I think he's a talent that is special. He's unique. He has the ability to make big plays, and I think he needs the ball in his hand a lot more than what he does. Hopefully, he can stay healthy and continue to move down that path. But as far as the other 2 guys, I think they're a great addition. I think those are guys that are going to make great impact. They all bring something different to the table. Each back is different. No back is the same as the other. So the defensive now, they have to prepare for something different. Okay, when Bucky's in, we're going to get this. When Noah's in, we're going to get this, and vice versa. So it brings more to the table. It adds a lot more to the offense. It adds more value to that position. And then as far as just being able to wait your turn, you got to know that Bucky's a guy. You want to play, you want the ball in your hands. That's what makes you a competitor. But you have to learn how to channel that. You have to learn you don't get jealous, you don't get envious. Coach Campbell used to have this saying, you don't count your reps, you make your reps count. And that's something that stuck with me throughout my time at Oregon and all throughout my NFL career. That's something that those guys don't count your reps. But when your rep come, make it count. Make it count. And continue to make it count every time it comes, so you continue to prove to Dan and those guys that you need the ball in your hands. And okay, maybe we could take the load off of Bucky a little bit, and we could do this, that, and the other. So just understanding that your time is going to come. Be patient, stay patient, and when it comes, capitalize on the opportunity, so you have nobody to blame if something goes wrong or if it goes right, other than yourself.
Fentress, I'm gonna jump in here real quick.
Sure.
I'm gonna jump in, just so we understand. Like, in the day of NIL and leaving and transferring and in one year and out the next, can we please just remember that we had the best backup running back in all of college football for
3 years?
Was it 3 years?
3 years.
And remind us, Kenjon, how many did you go for against USC your senior year when you finally did get that start?
6,847.
Like
Something like 321. Like, that's all I'm saying. Like, can we please just take a moment and just say thank you and acknowledge what we had.
It's a different age, man. It's different. Obviously we're in the NIL days. We didn't have a choice but to wait, So times were a little bit different. And, we live in a social media era now where everything is instant, everything is right now. A lot of these guys, they don't come up the hard way. They don't, not to say that they're not working hard or anything, but it was a little bit different coming up. When I was coming up, when you were coming up, you had to sit, you had to wait. And when your opportunity came, you went and got it. You didn't complain. You didn't look for an out. I made a commitment here. I'm going to stick to this commitment. I'm going to get it done one way or the other.
Now, I talked to you about that when we talked on the phone for the Oregon Live article.
Yeah.
And I kind of suggested that you could have been the prime candidate to bounce because you were backing up LaMichael. And you said no. You weren't that kind of guy. Yeah. You would have stuck it out. Even if you didn't have to sit out a year like you did back in your day, you would have had to. But today you wouldn't have. And someone probably would offer you a bunch of money to come be their starting running back. But you said you would have turned that down and stayed at Oregon.
Yeah, and I stand on that. I had the opportunity to go to my dream school when I did commit to Oregon. They came along after I already committed to Oregon, and I didn't budge. I didn't move. Someone asked me on Twitter, there was a conversation about staying and playing somewhere, and I said I'm the wrong person to ask because there's certain things that I just wouldn't fold on. And me giving my word to Oregon, I wouldn't have folded on. I wouldn't have backed out because things weren't going my way at that current moment in time. I'm a firm believer if you stay the course, grind hard, work hard, your time is going to come.
And your time came with, I'm looking here, 1,800 yards, 23 total touchdowns, and like I said, 6,000 against USC. Last thing, by the way, one of the most iconic photos in Oregon history is you being lifted in the air by Kyle Long with the SC fan behind you giving you the bird. Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
So the new running backs coach, Coach Laughlin, one of the first things he did was give out a shout out on Twitter and all over the place to Coach Campbell, said he was going to honor Campbell by getting that running back room right. He's a great line where he says he doesn't bake any soft batch cookies, which when I first heard
Soft
him say
batch
that,
cookies, I
cracked
love
up.
it.
Have you had a chance to meet him and talk to him? And what did it mean to you
Absolutely.
as a Campbell disciple that he gave a shout out to your guy?
Absolutely. Locke, that's the guy that I've had the most interaction with. Me and Locke were actually just texting earlier. I was asking him about the team, how everything was going, but that's somebody who I see text from on a daily, whether he's sending devotionals or he's checking in. I love Locke. I love that man. That is a not a good man. That's a great man. So him coming in, doing what he did as far as giving a shout out, paying homage to Coach Cam and the guys that came before, that's of his character. That's just who he is. He's a guy he's a history guy. That's somebody that you could sit and you could have a conversation with about the history of football, the history of the running back position. And then once he got to Oregon, it was the history of the running back position at Oregon and the coaches. And so him giving that shot, that's just who he is. He studies Oregon history. He knew every single back once he got there. New numbers, all that. That's just who Locke is. Locke is a great man. He's a great dude. I got nothing but love and respect for him. And again, him doing what he did, paying homage and giving that shout out to Coach Cam, that's just who he is. He's a guy who appreciates what was done before him, and he's a guy that if he sees greatness, he wants to replicate that, if not try and make it better.
All right, final segment of Talkin Ducks. When we come back, we'll give you our predictions plus a player you should keep an eye on as Oregon gets set to kick off the season against Portland State. You're watching Talkin Ducks, built by Par Lumber. Welcome back to Talkin Ducks. Time now for Victory Road, brought to you by Capital Toyota. Your way on the highway. And gentlemen, by the way, love the shirt there, Aaron. Go ahead and keep rocking that. We've got some predictions for Portland State. Anthony, let's start with you. Give us your thoughts on this game. Also, a player we should keep an eye out for.
Well, sorry, Aaron. It's going to be a blowout. I mean, I think it's going to be a blowout. I'm not going to give points, but Oregon's defense may shut them out. And that's what they need to do, this type of game. So it could be 55-0, 50-0, in that area. And then the guy I'm looking to watch just create havoc is Jordan Birch, the defensive end, edge rusher. He is built like a man. He looks like he plays in the league right now. Have you seen him in person? He is a big man. He's played down south. He knows how to play the game. He's going to be tough to stop. I'm watching him.
I'm interested. We talked a little bit about receiver and having someone around Franklin. Man, Tez Johnson, just the clips from the spring game, how fast and quick he is. He reminded me, a little bit of DeAnthony Thomas, Charles Nelson in terms of the smaller guy and the quickness in space. He is going to be a great all-around receiver for Bo Nix. Someone on this team who he can dump it off too short and he can take it to the house. So I'm excited to see him in action for the first time with the Ducks.
Are we getting a score there, Fentress?
Oh, look, man, you guys talk about the offensive line's new, the pass rush is weak. Bo Nix, those posters went to his head. I got the Vikings, baby, 27-16. Up to the decade. I didn't want to say it on this show because I didn't want to get kicked off the show, but I'm keeping it real. I'm rolling with the Vikings, baby.
Good. I like to see that the old homerism isn't just a Anthony Newman
Duck thing.
Okay, look. So I said I want to see how the offensive line is going to be a key to them. I said that earlier in the show, but they are truly surrounded by fantastic players all around them. So I'm not worried about them. Portland State is, like we all know, it's going to be a rough one. It's going to be a 50 to something little. Or it should be, right? I remember a couple of years ago, was it against Portland State, I think, where they gave up 20 some points, and people were nervous. We've talked about 4 new starters in the secondary. We've talked about an edge rusher, who's supposed to be a superstar. We've talked about Jordan Birch coming in new. I want to see Brandon Dorless. I want to see this guy that was an anchor for the defense last year. He was a second-team All-Pac-12 player last year. I want to see him be the foundation, right? I want to see him be that The guy who sets the tone and then lets everybody else flourish around him. That's what I want. I want to see the defense be dominant. And I want to see Brandon Dorlus come out and be the guy that everybody looks to. Because Anthony, you got to have that guy. You got to have that one, whether it's a Jeremy Asher, a Chad Cota, some guy that's the linchpin of a defense and allows everybody else to play freer. And I think that's what Brandon Dorlus could be for him this year.
All right, fellas, great job today. That'll do it for this edition of Talkin Ducks. Oregon kicks off against Portland State, but next week it should be very exciting as Oregon gets set to travel to Texas Tech. We'll give you our thoughts on that one. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see y'all next time.